do not leave that kind of constant log in there. But there, now our API key is set up properly, so we can actually hit our API. But with the free version, what's the word I'm looking for? We get rate limited. So as I'm developing, I don't want to be like hitting the API over and over and over again, because I will run out of uses very quickly. So this is where our mocks come into play. So I'm going to take my API key and I will get a random recipe right here, and I will copy the raw JSON, and then inside of my mocks, I'm going to add the data. I'm going to add random. What was the endpoint of it? /random. Yeah, so I'm going to call it random.json. Paste that in there, format the document. And now I have my random recipe object, right? Inside of my handlers, I'm going to create a handler to deal with this API endpoint. So I'm going to get my endpoint, and then the data I'm going to have in there is going to be random, and I have to import my random, let's call it random recipe. Import random recipe from /data/. That's what I'm doing here. So now, every time, you can see in the console, every time we hit that API, it's not going to go to the API and use up my, cost me money or whatever. It's going to get the random recipe from the inline data. So that's pretty cool that we can do that there. And now I'm setting my data. I'm setting my data using useState, and I can use that data to generate stuff on my card. So earlier I said, okay, let's have it show card with a set show card, right? Well, when I press the button, it opens the card, but it doesn't have any data in it. Oh, so the fetch request hasn't happened yet. And we have to trigger these events. We don't want the fetch request happening right away. We only want it happening whenever the button is pressed. So inside of our fetch request, or not inside of our fetch request, but inside of our use effect, we're going to need to do a couple things, right? Can anyone explain to me what this array is right here? Inside of the use effect. Okay. So let's go over that real quick. Let's go to use effect. And how many people have actually read the documentation on use effect?
It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. Use effect, setup, and dependencies. Question mark. So setup is the function with your effects logic. Your setup function, it can also return a cleanup, everything like that. And then optional dependencies, the list of all reactive values referenced inside of the setup code. Reactive values include props, state, and all the variables and functions declared directly inside your component's body. So what we can do is put a React state inside of this dependency array. That way, anytime it changes, the use effect will run. So we can say on click, instead of set show card, maybe we say, I don't know. Let's create one called I don't know, is fetching. It's a Boolean, is fetching, either it does or it doesn't. And we create a React state or component that says is fetching, and we can do set is fetching. Right? So instead of set show card here, maybe it sets we do set is fetching to true. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll go to my app and let's see what's going on. So I can find recipe, but now my card's not appearing. It's like, oh yeah, it's because down here we had show card. So maybe instead of depending on show card, maybe we'd have is fetching. So I go here and I click, and it's like, okay, now it transitions over, but then I notice show card and set show card aren't really used. So what I really do there, I just kind of renamed the same variable. But that's part of development, right? You're gonna run into situations where you're like, okay, I did something at first. Let me change the wording around so it makes a little more sense. And so I kind of just like refactored the same thing. But I don't want. Okay. So I now have it so that when I press, let's get rid of that. When I press the button, it then fetches and it displays the card. So this fetch request no longer happens. Okay, it does happen immediately. Let me think through that. It happens immediately because we're not checking whether or not we're fetching. Okay. So inside my use effect, it's fetching immediately, but I can check, not is fetching. We can do one thing. We can just return. Else, we can check if it is, or maybe we do the reverse. We just check is fetching. Oops, that's not what I wanted to copy in there. So we just check if it is fetching, then we run our fetch request. Otherwise, we just kind of leave it alone. So now, when we refresh, we have no fetch request happening. When I click on the button, it sends the fetch request. But now our card shows up, even though there's no, we're not passing data in it right now, but there's no data yet. The fetch request hasn't finished. So I'm pulling this back out of is fetching, and I'm going to set up a different conditional render based on data. So if there's not data, we're going to display null, else we're going to display our recipe card. Right? So now I press the button. It looks like it's just happening instantaneously, but that's because the data is there, or it's because the fetch request happens pretty quick. But I want to, from this fetch request, I want to put in a image prop, a name, and a description. Kind of hopping around a bit. Let me go over where this is coming from, right? Inside of our recipe card that we made earlier, we have an image, name, and description as the props. So I need to pass that data into it. So that's where I'm getting those properties from. So let's take a look at our mock data, and let's take a look at and see if we have access to this information, right? So this is the data. Let's search and see if there is a name.
There you go.
I guess there's a title right here. Okay, awesome. So for our name, we're going to put our data.title. What is actually the path? Let me double check. The title is actually inside of recipe. So we actually need to do data.recipe 0.title.
Is it just because you want the first one?
It's because the recipe comes back as an array, and there's only one in it. You see that? There's only one object. So another thing I could do is instead of having that in there, I could say, okay, in my request, I can do results.recipe 0.
What happens if you don't have the 0?
Yeah, okay, so let's do that. Let me make the mistake first. I'm kind of just trying to like catch the mistakes before. Let's just do data.title for now.
Or just like data.recipe.title, like if you didn't have 0 in there.
Then you can't do that. It would error out. Or it wouldn't error out and just give you undefined. So there's an image right here as well. Let's just do it as we do. And then let's see, do we have a description? A summary. Perfect. So let's do data.summary, right? So now I save, and I refresh, and I find it, and there's still like nothing on there. So, you know, at this point I'm like really confused. So I console.log data.image, or let's do data.title start, and save, and I get undefined. I'm like, what? Why is it undefined? And then I go back and look at my object model, and I can see that has this recipes, this dot recipes, and that's in an array. So I can go up in here to this results, and I can say result.recipe, and I can say, okay, let's try that. And it's like, whoa, now I'm getting some real errors. Cannot read property of undefined reading title. That's because recipes with an S. Okay. Recipes with an S. So I'm like, okay. Now it's like, cannot read property of undefined reading title. Okay. So I need the 0 there because I need the first array. And I'm still getting errors because of console log. Okay, that's annoying. You see all the console logs here? My code is fine. Without that console log, I'm good. You know, relatively speaking. It looks like some HTML site to fix that. But when I have this console log in there, it starts freaking out and it gives me an error because we've never fetched any data. This data is empty. Or we start as null. So down here we have this conditional render. That way, we only access data when we only access our data when what am I trying to say here?
When it's there.
When it's there, when it exists, right? Exactly. So you have to be careful. It's like we also have to create a ternary for this as well, and this is where that conditional render or this optional chaining comes in. We can say data, if data is not null, go to title, right? But without it, it crashes. So you'll run into these issues, and it says cannot read properties of null, or it'll say cannot read properties of undefined. Typically that means you'll need this optional chaining. So now it's undefined right now, but if I click find recipe, you can see that it gives me coconut cream pie vegan milkshake. And you can see the rest of the data is there. But, I mean, this looks like...
I have a really dumb question.
No, that's not a dumb question.
Why does it always console log it twice? Why it always...
Yeah. It's because it's because state is changing. So, like, we have this is fetching is set to true, so it fetches it, and then it gets the data, and if the data comes back fast enough, it console logs, and then I set the data, and when I set the data, it re-renders the component, because everything inside, like before the return, and inside the component, all of this code is run every single time the component is re-rendered, and when our component is re-rendered,
When we reset the state.
when we set state.
Reset state.
So if you have multiple state variables, like things can re-render multiple times, and that's why like there's also an art to like where you put your console logs.
Yes,
Yeah,
I've
you know.
noticed that.
It's like it gets really confusing. That's why I was like label your console logs, right? But anyway, here we have it, and the summary has this like HTML to it, which is kind of weird. So let's check our object. Maybe one that's not HTML. I don't think we do. Yeah, really we have this like HTML thing. So it's like, okay, can Can I do something with that HTML? How do I deal with it?
I Google it.
You know, it's like, okay,
Google function
JS, can I parse HTML? So I have an HTML string. I'm using the word parse. Parse means to like kind of read through and convert. JS turn HTML string to HTML. Turn HTML string into a DOM element. That sounds kind of right. You can use a DOM parser. Okay. Do DOM parser, parse from string. Okay. Things works great. It says, okay, this person like saying, why can't you just use HTML there? Let's see. There's also this dot inner HTML to extract the contents. Why not use insert adjacent HTML? Interesting. Like all this kind of stuff. Out of these three, I'm just gonna go ahead, let's give inner HTML a try. This one right here. So I copied everything there. So where do I convert this? Do I want to convert it in the card itself, or yeah, I want to convert it in the recipe card. So the recipe card with its description, and I want to create a function to parse HTML string, and so I want to have a, give it a string, here's my HTML string. And I don't like using bars, so let's continue as a const. But I have this wrapper, document.create element div. And then I want to do my wrapper, inner HTML, and then I want to provide it my HTML string. And then it says const div equals wrapper.firstChild. And I guess I want to return div. Or I can just return wrapper.firstChild. Maybe do that. And then for this description, I can then parse the string. Let's see if that does something that we want it to do. I'm in React app, and I find recipe, and it's completely blank. Why? Because I have some errors. Child supplied to forward topography expected React node. Okay, so I can't give that to topography. So I put it outside of topography. Objects are not valid. Okay. Let's just console log this and figure out what's going on. I'm going to go back to where there's a div, that way I can console log the div. Parse HTML string. Let's see what this is, and then click the button. And I'm just debugging. Console log wrapper. Okay, wrapper seems like the actual div, whereas before wrapper first child seemed to be just that like string. So let's not do that. Let's just return wrapper from the looks of it. And then let's see if this renders. The button, it does not render because object's not valid. Okay, got it. Let's move that out of topography. Do it there. Look like it. Is there anywhere in this card that I can put this? Put that in the card, I don't know. Really doesn't like it. So this might be a more difficult issue than originally thought. And you can see how things can get a little bit wild. Again, let's see if there's some data here that we can use instead as a description. I don't know, but let's just move forward with it. Let's not parse it. Let's just leave it alone and just have it. Let's just have the HTML do just look the way it does, right? I think I'm losing y'all.
No, I just found a different function that I'd like you to try.
What do you want to try? What's it called?
Well, just I found it on Geeks for Geeks. How to strip out HTML tags from a string.
What method? Oh, okay. So remove
Yeah.
HTML tags from string. So instead of like trying to make the HTML render, we're just gonna strip them out.
Right.
Okay. Let's do JS, and that's on Geeks for Geeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's one remove tags.
Okay. So
That
let's.
one.
Is this right here?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Let's give that a try.
Excuse me. Do you guys have a restroom in here? I'm here for the water meter readings.
To your left.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have this remove tags. Okay, so let's do that. Let's remove tags. Let's give that a go. And then remove tags. Description. Okay, give that a go. React app, refresh, find recipe. Boom. Okay, awesome. That's pretty cool. That's good enough for today's work. But I also want to show you something a little bit neat, which is I create this utilities folder, right? Remove tags looks like a great function that isn't like explicitly for this. Like I could use it for anything. If I have another React project and I need to do the same thing in the future, like this would be a great code snippet to have around. So I'm gonna cut it there, and I'm going to export it from my utilities function. My utilities.js, right? So now in recipe card, I can import, and I use the curly braces, and I can import, what was the function called? Remove tags. And I import it from our
Now
utility.
you don't even have to define it in this.
Yeah, I have to define it, which is the downside, but the good news is like, I'll never have to, like, over time you build up these little code snippets that you find from the internet, and then you can use them anywhere. In any application you have, you just copy over this whole utilities folder, and you're good to go. Right, so now I have remove tags there, I save, make sure it works, boom, it works, awesome. So we're gonna burn a drink, I guess.
And you took remove tags out of recipe card.
Yeah, I deleted it from recipe cards, and I abstracted it.
Got it.
I moved into our utilities. This is like
So at every time, like we're working in a project and we, merge, is that the right word, back up to the main?
Yeah.
Your utilities will merge back up to it.
Yeah, so the file will be there, but my thing is like, if you're on a new project, I'm gonna include the link of like where I got it from.
Yeah, right.
That way I can reference it in the future, but you'll build these up over time,
Yeah.
these little snippets. It's like here's a good one, like JS add commas to number. No, I don't like this one. Let's see, like right here, 1,000 separator, something like that. Something right here, number with commas, and there's like this code snippet. So like this is another one that I could add. You know, I'm not using it right now, but I would like export function number with commas, and then I could have this, and it's like I might use this like a dozen times in my application. That way I don't need to do it for every single component I make. So yeah, that's like my general purpose utilities function, my utils function. That's why that exists. But anyway, that's there. The last thing I want to do is inside of my index, I like to abstract out my API as well. So you see this fetch request here. I have this try catch, everything like that. I take this fetch request, I delete it from here. And we'll leave it there for a quick second, but I put in my API and I can export const get random recipe, right? And then I can paste it in here, and I can return the fetch. And see here, it's like it says set data. I can't set data in here, but I can dot then, because I'm returning